Folks, I think I found the problem. I think I found the reason why people look at us funny when we say we love horror films. Is it a vampire movie? Not really, but I still think you'll enjoy Teeth. I finished watching Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, and I'm pretty certain it is the whole reason why no one has any respect whatsoever for slasher films and why we needed Scream to come along in 1996 and nuke the whole genre from orbit. It is the only way to be sure, after all. But in the spirit of that film, in the spirit of Jason Takes Manhattan, I've got myself a Manhattan here that I am not going to interact with for the whole video. It's just going to be there, it's kind of named, and it's going to have nothing really to do with what's going on. Maybe towards the end, I don't know. Now, spoilers folks, Jason never actually takes Manhattan in the course of this film. In fact, he barely locks eyes with Manhattan, let alone getting as far as sweet second base with Manhattan. It's quite frankly an egregious misuse of the title. We'll cover the fine details later, but I want to just sum up why this is an archetypally bad slasher film. And that is namely, the film doesn't care about anything. It doesn't care about anything early on and doesn't really try and make you care either. You can be jovial and light-hearted in a horror film and have it work just fine. That's definitely possible. But you can do that and still make the audience care. The opening isn't bad. It's more in the vein of Friday the 13th Part 6 and Part 7, which tried to be more sincere. But it's also not great. I mean, there is an interesting recap of the series. It's kind of just a shortcut to getting Jason back as soon as possible. Don't really ask about the mechanics of it. It's not designed to make sense. I mean, after Part 5, just accept that Jason is back. You don't need to know why. Because reasons, okay? Jason's back because of reasons. After that very swiftly accomplished resurrection, we go into a sort of pattern of abridged meetings with characters who then die before we get a reason to care about them. E.g. this Diet Coke Ramones girl that we meet and who is then killed in the very next scene. By killing her off so soon and in such a weird way, the film is leaning kind of heavily on ridiculousness, which is fine, but then it also veers into trying to be scary occasionally as well, and it just switches back and forth. It's a very uneven tone throughout the whole film, and that unevenness in the tone is one of the key problems with Jason Takes Manhattan. Ridiculous characters like this headmaster that we're encouraged to hate, who are kind of pathetic figures, they run up against really nasty scenarios, like this scene here where the heroine is kidnapped with the implication that she's going to be gang raped. That is really heavy stuff, and it does not work with a less serious tone in the rest of the movie. It's a really bad choice. I also want to just fully acknowledge and own that yes, killing is no less serious, murder is no less serious, but also we have to accept that culturally we are a lot more comfortable viewing murder in a much wider range of tones. We can see it comedically, we can see it in a less involved action sense, and we can see it in a very serious, drawn-out sort of way. I don't think we kind of have that emotional range with sexual violence, and that's why the scene just really jars with the rest of the film. One of the other things that really stops us engaging with the film and caring about what's going on is that the characters are also kind of directionless. They're not really following their own character arcs to any major degree. They're just chilling on this boat until they're picked off by Jason, and eventually they do coordinate to try and escape Jason, but that is late into the film. That is long past the point at which we should be engaged with these characters and identifying with them and giving a damn what happens to them. So there's a tonal dissonance, the bad acting, the underdeveloped and very scattered characters, and the lack of a clear plot direction. All of these things combine to stop me, and presumably you, giving a darn what the heck happens to anyone in the film. That is a big problem. If you're not engaged with the film, you're not connected to it, and you are not feeling scared, you're probably not feeling entertained. And with all these factors stopping us engaging with the characters and the story, our unforgiving eyes start to notice things that are a little bit weird. We might wonder at what point Jason got a new outfit, since we much preferred his backless, spine-exposing design in Part 7. I mean, he's been out of action underwater since the end of Part 7, so where's he got this new boiler suit from? And why is he less rotted than before? You wonder where the main character's dog goes off after it wanders off here, and why she's not especially concerned with finding it. You're even more confused when the dog suddenly returns after 35 minutes in the lifeboat here, and no one says anything about it. No one acknowledges it, just the dog is there again. Why does this child have 5 o'clock shadow? Why was Tommy Wiseau cast? And why is Jason now able to teleport in this film? Now, the point about Jason teleporting in this movie is serious. It actually happens so many times that it becomes kind of surreal and hilarious. It has to be said that it is kind of a convenient thing in slasher films that the killers will be walking and the characters will be running away, and yet somehow the killer will get to them. And that does get sort of disguised through camera work, through changing locations, through confusion. But there is a marked difference between that sort of sleight of hand in the genre and Jason straight up teleporting, which he does here. Nothing personal, kid. It's just so transparent that you know the inner logic of the film is just broken. And when that happens, it means a story means nothing. Where did he come from? Where did he go? And where did he come from, Hockey Mask Bro? Now, it's one thing to analyse a film after watching and realise that there was a plot hole that kind of escaped you whilst you were enjoying the film, and that's kind of a good sign, you know, you were so engaged in the film that you didn't notice. It might weaken the film, but clearly it's not so big a problem that you can't engage with it. But here, knowing that the physics is broken, that the chase is completely pointless because Jason is just going to teleport to wherever he needs to be to execute the kill, you just stop caring. It's just kind of ridiculous and you end up laughing at the film. It's distancing. It is not good storytelling. It is not good filmmaking. I mean, this also doesn't help. Actually, let's stay with this scene because I want to nerd out a little bit. I think this will help us understand the problem. This scene is really important in showing the lost opportunity of Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. This guy, Julius, he is the most interesting character in the film, even as a side character. He's got this skill that he's really proud about, his boxing, and he shows himself to be a leader once they realise that Jason is attacking everyone on the boat. And there's this interesting scene where the teacher attempts to claim authority and he just rejects it. He just decides that he's going to stand up for himself and sort of take charge of his own destiny. In doing that, he shows himself to be a lot more interesting. He changes the dynamic in an interesting way. Now, unfortunately, he loses his friends to Jason in what could have been a far more interesting many-on-one fight that broke up the repetitive kind of low-effort killings the film is built around. And losing his friends should be a character moment. It should make him more interesting. It should challenge his conception of himself as a leader and a fighter. But that opportunity is lost. They didn't make anything of it. It's like they didn't care to. After losing the fight to Jason on the boat, he doesn't really get much to do until this scene, and it's meant to be his big moment, and they just bungle it. And even given all the nonsense before in the film, they had all the ingredients they needed here to make a really good scene. So there is a clear scenario. He is cornered on the roof. He has one way out. And unlike the others, he's not going to try and run away. He knows that he has to fight through Jason to get to that one way out. And because he prides himself on his boxing, this is really a test of Julius's self-worth. Jason is a serious test of the characteristic by which Julius defines himself. And the actor actually does a pretty good job of mixing in his fear with his attempts to psych himself up to remind himself of his fight technique. This should be dramatic, but they fumble it. For a start, there's no music, which makes the whole thing feel kind of flat. The second mistake here is the framing of the fight. Now, Jason is mildly affected by being punched, but he effectively just lets Julius wear himself out and exhaust himself. And that means there's not much of a dynamic change here. There's not much of a raising and then dashing of hopes. Combined with the lack of music, the lack of reaction from Jason, also sort of robs the scene of the dramatic potential. And that's a real shame because there was promise in this. Julius just exhausting himself and realizing that he's lost, he has no chance, and he's running out of energy, that could have been chilling, but it kind of felt more like it was played for laughs, and then it's capped off with this terrible effect. This had the potential to be a good scene, just like the film had a potential to be a really good sequel. You see, Friday the 13th Part 8, it makes a really bizarre choice to use a really big scale of story, you know, Jason taking Manhattan. It brings Jason to the city, and then it does nothing with that. It's the whole Chekhov's rifle thing, like, why bring Jason to the city if that's not going to have a major influence on the plot and what goes on, you know? There's no big police response to Jason, and what is that? What the heck am I watching? Just why? And that's very similar to the weird problem of the dog. They've gone to the effort of writing a dog in, and then because it's inconvenient to film scenes with animal actors, they just have the dog run away for most of the film and then return, run away again, and then return again. It's really pointless and distracting. Just leave the dog out, no matter how good a doggo it is. And it is a very good doggo. Its name is Ace. The setting being irrelevant is very clear in, say, scenes like on this subway train. The people on this subway just barely react to Jason at all, and I don't know if they're trying to make a point about alienation in the city that maybe is reaching a bit too hard there. It's a total waste of a setting and the effort to put this scene together. Ultimately, this is such a shame because Jason Takes Manhattan had potential. It had real potential to be a good sequel. You have Julius, who is an interesting character. Most of the film takes place on a ship, which is quite novel in terms of changing up the setting, and it also really offers potential for a lot of claustrophobia if the direction is good. Taking Jason to the big city, that offers a whole load of story choices that you don't have in small town and forest settings. Consider that Friday the 13th Parts 6 and 7 were actually pretty darn traditional and very much in line with the standard format of the series, give or take a certain sprinkling of telekinesis. Those films didn't change much, but they had the flourishes and the detail that made them very strong entries in the series. Jason Takes Manhattan makes some really big changes, and those changes should have offered opportunities that could have made for a really strong, different, dynamic story. Instead, we got this.
Yo, man, it's cool. It's cool, man. It's cool.
The impression I get here is of a rushed film, a film that started ambitiously but just ended up getting pushed out as soon as possible. I mean, this came out 1 year after the last entry, Part 7. The nonsensical use of Jason, the flat characters, the lack of emotional grounding or passion, it doesn't make for good horror. But let's be optimistic. Let's accentuate the positive here. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, is the creative bankruptcy that made Paramount flog off the franchise. It is the nightmare nadir that resulted in Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Scream, films that called out laziness and predictability in slashers and demonstrated that good slasher films could still be made. I like to look at Jason Takes Manhattan as the bottom that horror hit before realising it had to shape up and give us more creative, high-quality revisions like Halloween H20 or new style slashers like Hush that zero in on likeable, endearing characters that are the sole focus of the film and therefore in no way disposable. If the protagonist of Hush were off in the first scene after we met her, that movie is done and we are out. It just wouldn't work. And lastly, Jason Takes Manhattan is part of the canon that was ultimately distilled into what was a really rather good reboot in the 2009 Friday the 13th, which I have to maybe somewhat guiltily say I think is the best entry in the whole series, even if you can, get past the heresy of that statement and the Ship of Theseus problem. Jason never needed to take Manhattan. He needed to take a few more shots at the script. Thanks for watching. I hope that was interesting. Even if you haven't seen Jason Takes Manhattan, I'm not going to blame you if you didn't. I'm not sure I'm going to have persuaded anyone here to give it a go. I do have one more Friday the 13th film to go, so this will not be the last you hear from me on the series. As ever, I would like to help spread the love for horror films, so do me a favour. It would really help if you shared this video with people who might be interested, and subscribe if you are not subscribed already. I'm a tiny channel and every new subscriber is an absolute delight, and you'd be really helping me out. And yeah, that is all from me this week. Thanks, y'all. Cheers.